Today I'm going to show you two of the main mapping tools that I use when I'm researching where to go fossicking. The first one, which is usually where I get started, is called MRT Map, and it's provided by Mineral Resources Tasmania, which is a branch of the Department of State Growth in Tasmania. They are in charge of, they're essentially the old mines department. They're in charge of anything to do with mining, prospecting, minerals, etc. And the address of this MRT map is www.mrt.tas.gov.au/mrt_maps/app/list/map. Anyway, what you get is this map of Tasmania, and I might just zoom in on an area around Lefroy, one of our main northeastern goldfields, just to use as an example. So this is their basic outline map, which they call, here's the base maps tab, and this is called the topographic map. You can actually use several different base maps when you're looking at this sort of information. You can use the 1 to 25,000 scan maps, which you might be more familiar with, or you might already have the paper maps. You can also choose to use the 1 to 25,000 geological map if it's available for that particular area, or the coarser scale 1 to 250,000 geological maps. And you can also choose to overlay satellite imagery, not overlay, use as a base map, or use the magnetics as a base map if you're interested in looking at magnetic anomalies. We'll continue with the topographic map for now, and I'll show you some of the different layers that you can overlay on top of this map to make it extra useful for research. One of them is, or the first layer that I usually always consult, is called, and I'll start from the beginning. You've got a layers tab in here, which is half hidden in the corner. You click on layers, you add a layer, and it's under mineral occurrences here. It's the mineral occurrences layer, and you click the plus sign to add it. We can now close that, and if you have a look here, it's overlaid all the known occurrences of minerals in the Lefroy area onto the screen. I can close that tab now, and we've got a bit more screen space. So, what I've just done is just click and drag. You can click and drag to move the map around. Everything that's marked in green is an alluvial occurrence, in this case of gold, and everything that's marked in purple is a hard rock occurrence. Now, it's not necessarily gold if you're looking at other parts of the state. Lefroy just happened to have been a goldfield, but if you click on one of these, what you get is the details of that particular record, and in this case you can see that it was the Bendigo mine. It's a hard rock metal deposit, and the main commodity was gold, the geological unit that it sits on, and also you get an idea how close to the actual location for that mine this dot is placed. And quite usefully, if you click on details here, it'll open a new tab, and we can see a bit more information on that particular prospect, but also if there are any published reports that mention that particular prospect. And so these can be quite good to go through if you're looking for information. It's a lot easier than searching using, say, Google search to search the Mineral Resources Tasmania library. So for example, we could click on one of these, the Lefroy Goldfield report here. It'll open a new little window that tells us a little summary of what that publication deals with. It was by Alexander Montgomery in 1897. He was the sort of chief government geologist at the time. You can choose to download the document, and it'll open a new window where you get a chance to accept the terms and conditions and open the report. And once it downloads, you'll have quite a large report to look at with a heap of information on that field. Now sometimes these are old government reports. Just waiting. Sometimes they are mining company reports, for example. And it's too bad, taking too long. Anyway, we can choose a smaller one to have a look at. Let's go back. Something like this should be a bit shorter, so we can click on this one and we go through the same process, summary of the document, accepting the terms and conditions, and downloading the document. This shouldn't take us long. Famous last words. There we go. So now we can look at this particular report for, let's blow it up a little bit, which is an exploration company report of the particular Lefroy plot, and you can see all of the summaries, maps, and all that. There's a huge amount of these, and they all provide a huge amount of information. So there can be a really good research tool, but you have to do a lot of scanning to see whether the report actually says anything you're interested in or not. There's also a lot of time wasting looking at these. Anyway, let's close the report, close the screen. So that's what this mineral occurrences layer can be very useful for. It gives you the layout of all the main mines and alluvial prospects. You can change your base map to orient yourself a bit better if you're used to the other map, and you can find out almost as much information as you'd ever want on all of those. So let's say, for example, that I'm interested in spending a day here in the Chum line of reef, which is just north of Lefroy. This was one of the three main lines of reef in the Lefroy area that produced good dividends in the mines. The others being the Pinafore, which is just south of it, and the Volunteer, which is south of Lefroy. And so say I want to have a look, and I'm looking, say, detecting for gold nuggets or looking for alluvial gold. Then I can see where the line of mines is, and you know the mines are all along the same reef and they all have a name in common. For example, in this case, Chum United, West Chum, New Chum, and East Chum Extended would all have been along the Chum line of reef. Kitto Chum, just to the north, is actually on a different reef called the Kitto Chum Reef. So by knowing that the reef was along here and seeing the topography that seems to correspond quite well to this little lip on the hill there, then I know that probably downhill on this side or downhill on that side I've got the best chance of finding gold that's shedding off that reef. Now the next thing that I need to know if I want to go somewhere to prospect is whether the ground is under tenement already to somebody else, and there's a good chance it is, since in Tasmania a large proportion of prospective ground is under tenement, and if you're a prospector you need to get permissions from tenement holders. So you can get that information in this map by clicking on layers, add a layer, tenements, and say you're looking for gold. In theory, when you're prospecting, you should get permission from the holder of any kind of tenement over that land, but it's a bit complicated. Let's just concern ourselves with exploration licenses for metals, which is category 1, and mining leases. And so now you can see that the ground we're interested in here is hashed in blue, and it says RL1 2011. So we can click on that and find out a bit more information. And so open up the exploration licenses tab, and we'll see that RL1 2011, RL stands for retention license, is owned by Gregory RA, started on the October 11, expires in April 2016. By clicking on details, again, you can find a lot more. You should have contact details for the tenement holder if you want to contact them to get permission, for example. And there's often any linked literature. If there's any published reports that deal with that particular area, they're often linked to from here, so that can be quite useful. And you can find little maps of just the license boundaries and so on. Let's close this window and go back to looking at this. So we've established that it's under a tenement. We know the tenement holder's details if we want to contact them to get for permission. The next thing that we really would like to look at is whether that land is private property or a type of land tenure that you're allowed to access under your prospecting license. And for that we use a different mapping engine called ListMap. So I've got it on the side here. It uses the exact same mapping engine but you've got a whole lot of different layers of information you can access. So let's go to our area of interest around Lefroy. And now we've got, here we go. Now we've got the Chums area. We can't overlay the mines, but this is the same area we were looking at a moment ago. And we can add a new layer and go to Cadastre and add a land tenure layer. We close that. Close that. Now the land tenure is an opaque layer, you can't see through it, so what you can do is click on this little tab next to land tenure there and increase the transparency so we can actually see through to the ground below. Now this was that ridge that we'd looked at where the Chum Reef goes down, and we were looking at maybe prospecting on the north and south sides of that. So the things that you have to keep in mind is what land tenure is this particular block in green, and you can click on it and you'll actually get that permanent timber production zone land, and a Tasmanian prospecting license allows you to prospect in there without any worries. What about the stuff to the north? If we walk into it, that's also a future potential production forest. That's also allowed to prospect in. And if you wanted to prospect in that particular block there, you can see it's private freehold. And so you'd need to get permission from the landowner before you're straight into there. Now, another area that could potentially be prospective is just along the other side of the road here. And that's also in permanent future production forest land. And here it's in, I think, unallocated Crown land. But you also have to be careful that the land isn't leased or licensed to someone. And so you can add another cadastral layer for Crown leases and another one for Crown licenses. And so you can see that down here, this Crown land has lit up, and we can click on it and find that it has a Crown lease. And so if you wanted to prospect in there, you would need to get permission of the leaseholder. And that's it, essentially. Fairly useful mapping tools. Again, list map, much like MRT map, has various base maps you can look at. What I sometimes find quite useful is to load up the satellite imagery, and let's turn off some of these layers so they're not in the way. You could use Google Earth for the same purpose, but since you can access it from here, then why not? This is the area we were looking at. Now, this can be quite useful to try and decide whether tracks are recently open or not. Maps can be ancient, and tracks that were open and passable when the map was first made might have been overgrown many years ago. But for example, we could see here quite clearly that you could probably drive up that track. You won't know for sure till you get there, but it can be quite useful to look at things from the air. And that's the nuts and bolts of the two mapping engines. If you have any questions, then please just leave me a comment and I'll try to answer them as best I can.